Right, hiya, long time no see. I haven't done a video in about 6 months. This is the first one since like June, and it's the new year in 2 days' time, so I thought I'd do a video just closing out the year about a topic that I've been wanting to speak about for some time, and some of you have been asking about actually in recent months, so I thought it'd be an interesting one to speak about. So if you're new to the channel, or this is the first video you've seen from me, hello first of all. But you wouldn't have known that I lived in Poland last year. As an English teacher, I lived in a city in the south called Krakow, or Krakow in English, and I was teaching English at a university and in language schools, and it was my home. It was my home for almost a year last year. Now, while it wasn't much of a culture shock going to Krakow, because most people spoke English, it was still part of Europe, just like UK where I'm from. It's not too far from home, so it wasn't too hard to sort of jet off there and start living there. There were a few things that I found harder. Also, the whole of the COVID pandemic, the whole of the start of it, I spent in a foreign country by myself, so that was definitely difficult. But in this video, because my channel is solely centered around being asexual and being a bit different, I thought I would talk about that and how Poland was maybe different to countries like the UK, what I'm used to. Now again, if you're new to my channel, I am asexual. I've been doing videos about asexuality since 2015. Gosh, it's almost 7 years now, because we're going into 2022 in just a couple days' time. And so I was an asexual in Poland. Now, before moving to Poland, it never even crossed my mind how my sexuality might be negatively perceived in a country like this, or I never really chose a country where I thought would be more accepting towards LGBTQ plus, and I never really saw it as a big deal. Maybe I should have done. Maybe I should have done more research on this. But overall, I wouldn't have said my sexuality played too much of a part in my experience in Poland, but we'll get more into that. So during my time in Poland, I learned a lot more about the country that I didn't know about, and especially since it was during the COVID time, I had a lot more time to research about it and watch the news a lot more, find out about their politics, found out about, there was even an election going on in 2020 between Duda and Trzaskowski, and hearing the parties and even considering who I might have voted for during this election. So I learned a lot about the country being there, and one big factor that I did not know anything about, and maybe you might not either, is the fact that Poland is actually home to LGBT Free Zones. Now, just to make it crystal clear, because there might be some confusion over what LGBT free means, because some people might interpret that as in it's free to be LGBT there, that they're accepting towards it. This is not the case at all. LGBT free zones are actually zones in which they don't accept LGBT values in places like that. I watched an interview of a guy that's in his 60s, and he's been a resident in this town in the southeast of Poland for his whole entire life. And suddenly, with these zones propping up, he suddenly feels not accepted in his society, not accepted by his church, not accepted by the people around him, because these LGBTs, it's part of them now, it's part of their society, and that's what they consider as right, that the LGBT is not right, and being gay, or being bisexual, or being transgender, or being asexual, demisexual, whatever you are, if it's not straight, it's not right. Now, this definitely scared me, being there. I mean, this was, it's not even like the government were pushing against this, saying these parts weren't right. The government was actually for this, and they elected the President Duda, who was actually for this, and the leader of their main governmental party, the Peace Party, is actually for this, the marginalisation of minority sexuality, saying that they're not right, saying that a man should be with a woman, this is the only way to live, and if anyone goes against that, it's wrong. My initial response was anger to this. I had no idea how extreme the values were here, and that nothing was being done against it, because, as I say, the government sort of agree with it. But I was actually intrigued by it, and intrigued how this ideal came across, and how they sort of neglected those that weren't straight, and how the stigma arose in institutions, in schools, in universities, in healthcare, in anywhere you would find, in religion, of course. It's a fully Catholic country. It's really religious there, and again, that might be part of the reason that they have this sort of stigma towards those that aren't heterosexual. But it was really difficult to process how these beliefs are still apparent in Central Europe at these times in the 21st century. And although there's so much progress to go, it really made me feel grateful that I was part of such a culture that we have in the UK and perhaps in the US as well. Yes, there's still a lot of stigma towards those that are minority sexualities, but we have a lot more support on our side from government, from pride events, from people we can talk to. We've got a lot of more acceptance in Western society in comparison to this. And definitely feeling part of this society, working, living, just experiencing my whole life in Poland as a country in comparison to the UK, it really made me see, wow, the difference between the acceptance in the UK in comparison to the acceptance in Poland. Because like I said, there is still work needed, 100% there's work needed all across the world, but in certain countries there's a lot more work needed. And it shows how far certain Western countries especially have come in recent years, because there is a hell of a gap between certain maybe Eastern European countries, or if you go to the Middle East as well, countries like Saudi Arabia, places like this, you'll be looking at a lot more prejudice towards those that are of minority sexualities. Now that was just a brief overlook into Polish perception of minority sexualities. I didn't want to talk too much about that, although I probably have. I'm just looking at the time of the video already. But I wanted to talk more about my opinion, because you can look up all of these policies online. I'm not going to give you any more details on that. If you want to look up more about it, there's plenty of documentaries. Just type in Poland LGBT zones. But I want to talk about my experience whilst I was there, and also the people I spoke to. The first story I want to speak about is someone I lived with. I'm not going to say his name or anything. He wanted to keep this quite private. But he came out as gay to me, and he didn't feel safe coming out as gay to family members, to people around him, to friends, because he was scared that they would disown him. There were reports that went around that even the city centre I lived in, apparently, according to this guy, that he'd been living in Poland a lot longer than I had, but he said he'd known people that had been abused, that had been attacked, that had been stabbed because of this. I've even had reports from other friends there that knew a girl that was carrying a rainbow purse or a rainbow handbag, and not necessarily because she was part of the LGBT. I think she was bisexual, but she was just carrying a rainbow handbag to show her support for it. And she went to the capital, Warsaw, Warszawa, and she got beaten up and hospitalized because somebody didn't agree with this, and they beat her up because she had this rainbow bag. Not because they knew her, not because she had done anything wrong, simply for carrying this handbag. During an event, I think it was during their Independence Day, not this year but last year, an apartment that had a LGBT flag, a rainbow flag in their window, was blown up. It was somebody threw a grenade into this apartment, but believing that these people were not part of society and shouldn't belong to this. So you can really understand that if you are part of the LGBT community in here, you'd be really afraid to show it. The second ever Pride event was held in a city called Lublin in the east, central eastern Poland. And this is actually one of the LGBT Free Zones. And they held a Pride event in 2019. It's really, really recent, these Pride events that have been occurring. I think it was 2018, 2019, something like this, before the pandemic. And somebody tried to bomb the event. Somebody made a homemade bomb, and reports suggest, and it didn't go off as planned, so the homemade bomb wasn't as successful as thankfully wasn't as successful as they hoped, and thankfully nothing happened. But imagine you hear reports of that saying a Pride event, almost several people were injured or several people died because of a homemade bomb. Would you feel safe going to a Pride event knowing that people want to destroy you? There was one that was held in the capital of Warsaw, and there's just tear gas being thrown at these people. There's just things being yelled at to these people in protest. You would never feel safe. So it's really hard um, to feel a sense of belonging there. But not just that, but also to stand up for your, not beliefs, but who you are. It's not a belief. It's who you are. It's part of you. It's not a choice. You know, it's something that you know, you can choose to be violent towards it, but you can't choose to be part of the LGBT community. You are your it's your sexuality. It's not a choice at all. So it's really scary that you feel like there's something that you're born that way. You can't feel like at home with it, or you can't feel a sense of acceptance. Having heard this and these stories and all of this stuff on the news, and that nothing was sort of, they talked about it on the news, but again, it wasn't a sense of these people are wrong for abusing these people or whatever. It was sort of like, some people think it's wrong, some people don't think it's wrong, because a lot of people believe it's wrong to be part of the LGBT community. Supposedly the majority, because the majority are the people that put the government in power at the moment, and they're completely against it. And the way that they get votes or generate votes, especially from the older population, is by marginalising these LGBT, because they're so... a lot of the population are for that. It's really scary to think. Really, really, really scary. So in terms of myself and being asexual and stuff like that, I kept it on the down low. I kept it very, very quiet. I never felt the need to come out as it. It never was a thing that I wanted to make a big deal about. However, I made a video on YouTube when I first moved to Poland and the pandemic started, called like Stuck in Poland or something like that. And this generated a lot of Polish traffic. It generated a lot of Polish viewers coming to my channel because I put Poland in the title. This English guy speaking about Poland. A lot of people were interested in that. As a result, these Polish people came to this video, and then also saw older videos of mine, and started leaving comments, maybe even sent me some messages. Now, not all of them were horrid. Not all of them were horrid at all, but a load of them were disrespectful towards it, saying that it was propaganda on my part, saying that I'm trying to convert people to be, trying to start some sort of cult to be asexual. Some of them were nice. Again, I spread more awareness to some people. Some people hadn't heard of it, and they were actually interested in this. And yeah, so that was something that happened when I was in Poland. But again, this was never a face-to-face interaction. I get face-to-face interactions about asexuality on the down low. However, I am a teacher. I teach English as a foreign language. I would say 70% of my students are Polish because, as I say, I live there. A lot of my students are from there. I've been teaching them for a couple of years since living there, or online now from the UK. I live in the UK now. And I've told a few of them about being asexual, and I've got to say, they're all so accepting. I don't know if that's because they know me and we've formed more of a friendship as well over time, as well as the student-teacher bond that we have, but they're kind, they're respectful, they listen to everything I had to say. They never doubted my sexuality or tried to say that I was wrong or that I couldn't be this way. They're all accepting. I told a few of them about my YouTube channel. Even one of them sent me a nice Christmas present, which was a bookmark with a picture of me that she drew along with asexuality colours, because she is part of LGBT herself and she never felt accepted by her peers or people around her. So hearing that I'm that and I'm a teacher, she takes a lot of pride from that, and it was really, really lovely to receive such a gift from her and knowing that I have such a sort of effect on her life, and we formed this sort of friendship through that. So that was really, really nice. So my final thoughts, and although this video is a bit of a mess, I hope you've learned something from it. My final thoughts is it's not Poland as a whole that is against LGBT or because they've got these LGBT Free Zones, don't think that every Polish person is against this, or oh, you're from Poland, I won't come out to you, or something like this. This should not be the case at all. At the end of the day, it's what the people in power have implemented. There's a lot of people trying to go against this. There's still pride events trying to occur, as safe as they can do. And there's still a lot of people that you would tell that you're gay, that you're whatever, and they would be completely understanding for it. Especially the younger generation. They followed a lot of mainstream media, a lot of shows, TV series, films, from the Western side, from America, from the UK. They understand much more about these minority sexualities. The show Sex Education is a big hit in Poland. A lot of people love this show, and the way I've heard people speaking about it in Poland is a lot of positive vibes, a lot of thinking that their education system needs a lot more acceptance and a lot more content to teach people about the minority sexualities. So there's still a lot of acceptance among the population there. So although you hear on the news Poland's maybe not an accepting country, or Bulgaria's not an accepting country, Romania aren't, all of these Eastern European countries, and Central Europe obviously like Poland, do not generalise that to the whole population. That is never the case at all. I've got subscribers that are Polish, some of which I actually speak to, and they're asexual as well. So definitely, you know, as a minority ourselves, we shouldn't marginalise another minority being like Poland or these countries for being stigmatising asexuality, because they're not like that at all. It's not the whole population, it's just the government's values the problem. So hope that makes a bit of sense. I hope you've learned something from this. If you've got any comments, feel free to leave them in the description. I'd love to read them. And please give a like on the video if you enjoyed it. I'm not Polish, I'm British, so you know I don't live in Poland now. Things might have changed since living there. This is just my experience, so if it's not entirely what you expected, or if you could give a bigger insight if you are Polish into your country, then that would be much accepted, and I'd like to read that a lot. Even if you've got any corrections of what I've said, I would like to read those a lot. Thanks. Happy New Year to all of you. It's New Year in 2 days' time, and I'll speak to you very soon.